Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to the people on this side of the Atlantic. I will start with a short Zen story. Maybe it is known for some of you, but perhaps it is new for others. So during the Tang period, there was a known Zen master named Bird's Nest Roshi, and he used to sit on a branch of a tree. Maybe that's where he got his name. And in the province where Bird's Nest Roshi lived, there was a also well-known governor, Po Chui. I apologize for my pronunciation. And Po Chui was not no ordinary politician. He was also a well-respected poet. And one day, Po Chui went to see Bird's Nest Roshi. And Po Chui, the governor, asked the Zen master, "Tell me, Bird's Nest, what have all Buddhas taught?" Bird's Nest Roshi replied, "Never do evil, always do good, keep your mind pure." That's what all Buddhas have taught. Po Chui was not particularly impressed, and he replied back, "Bah, I knew that when I was 3 years old." "Yes," said Bird's Nest Roshi, "a 3-year-old child may know it, but even a 100-year-old person cannot put it into practice." So today I will talk about the gift of the precepts, and in particular the exploration of the ethical precept, the 10 pure mind precepts that I have done more consciously since I started the lay ordination process. But the very first time I heard about the precepts was some years ago when I started engaging with Buddhism. And often when we hear about ethics or ethical conduct, we have the conditioning of predefining it or labeling it based on our assumptions and our backgrounds, and not really exploring them actively. And that was my case back then. And I tried to make sense of it. I took the intellectual approach. So I tried to make some sense of it from the things that I knew. So first I thought, oh, this is maybe some type of revealed ethics, like the commandments. I mean, they look more or less similar, like first is third here, fourth is fifth, and so on. But it's not something that is revealed by a higher moral authority. And nor it is, I remember back then I was visiting some courses with some friends, and we also thought, oh, well, what about maybe a conventional ethics like manners, something that's transmitted from a cultural background? It's also not that. And what about utilitarian ethics like in economics? So acting according to what produces the most benefit for oneself or maximizes something for a certain group of people. But the Buddhist principles don't fall in these categories, and I had to actively and consciously explore the precepts in order to have a glimpse at understanding them. And so the precepts are more like guidelines, like trainings of the heart and of the mind, a little bit like stars for sailors. They allow you to navigate in the ocean. And so it involves, in the process I've noticed, it involves asking questions and refining those questions, and in the process deepening. So my second approach was then the goal-oriented one, the one trying to achieve to get something done. So like in a checklist. So, but I realized that there is really no finish line in the training. So so one of the so I've been practicing the precepts week after week, and I have this cousin with our teacher Mado. And I remember that one of the first precepts that I explored more consciously was not killing. And in my view was, well, I mean, I took maybe the very literal perspective. Well, I mean, today I didn't take out my knives and I didn't buy any guns, so I'm on my way to perfecting this one. But it's really not like that. I mean, this can be extended to something bigger, involving direct and also indirect actions. So by asking questions, one comes maybe at understanding that also is about not harming, right? And and what is the impact of our actions in relationship to things that we do, and also in relation and also to the ones what you are not so conscious doing. Like how much do my eating habits harm others, either directly or indirectly? Um, and maybe also extending them to values or things that are not so easy to touch. Like, what about killing dignity or motivation? Um, Maybe in a conversation, was there something mean that I said? Maybe a harsh comment, maybe a mean joke, and the intention was not really. Maybe there was something there, maybe some envy or maybe some frustration, uh, and maybe also seeing it from a broader perspective. I mean, who benefits, who gets oppressed by the systems that we are part of. Another precept that I remember, I will not go over every precept. We will do that in the next weeks, but I just want to give you some examples, not to make this so abstract. Uh, the one of not stealing. So I remember one of the first uh, nights after when I decided, okay, now these weeks I will explore uh, not stealing, and also the positive part, which is related to generosity. I remember going to bed and telling myself, well, I mean, today I didn't rob any bank, so this is really going very well. I mean, uh, but but I mean, it is again through questioning and also opening to some level of vulnerability. I found that this allows to go a bit deeper. I mean, also, what about taking someone else's time, energy, also resources, also taking other people's attention? I mean, am I taking away the living habitat of other beings through my consumption? Or maybe also in a conversation, am I manipulating other people, or maybe not only conversation, but am I manipulating other people to modify their behavior so that I get what I want? Uh, and maybe what about questioning if we are taking more than we need? And the same happened with the this is my last example with the misuse of intoxicants. So not only seeing the literal meaning of maybe, or maybe it's not literal, but maybe the common one of thinking of them as restricted to drugs and alcohol, but really trying to explore what clouds the mind, what doesn't allow me to see clearly. Maybe what about cell phones? or social media, movies. In my case, I found that news, what like reading a lot of news, was there was a moment when it was already affecting my uh, yeah, my mind, my emotions. I was starting the day with some level of yeah, frustration, of irritation, and maybe other aspects like that are maybe more subtle, like greed, anger, envy, sleep, or maybe an obsessive search for pleasure. Um, so, and how much is this related to maybe our activities? How much is my work conducive or detrimental to wise mental states? I mean, which activities? And with this one also, I've also opened to recognize activities that maybe are more positive, to bring the positive aspect of the precepts, like clarity. So which activities bring compassion and peace and are not another method of escapism? So in general, these questions are related to behavior, and I think it's not only about how to behave, but how to behave, for example, when we don't get what we want and when we get what we don't want. I mean, this inevitable characteristic of reality that sometimes we prefer to ignore or to forget. And it is also an exploration to the inside. Where do our actions come from? Is it from a place of greed or desire or envy? Or is it maybe from a place of compassion, even though maybe the action itself might not be uh, maybe the wisest, because every situation requires a different action, a different understanding. But maybe it comes from a place of empathy, or maybe from a place of love. Cornel West says, justice is how love looks in public. Another aspect that I've observed in exploring the precepts is that there is a meditative feature, like this process of engaging with the precepts, of questioning, of refinement, of looking for a wise action, even though it might not come, is in some ways it creates a gap of awareness, and this gap is a gap of awareness between our actions and the awareness of them, and it felt like, or it feels like, the gap in like this awareness in meditation when one is observing things. And at the beginning, this gap was very small. And I mean, now it's maybe still very small, but it has stretched a little bit. And the more I've been practicing them, the more it makes sense to observe them. Uh, so one of the task homeworks that Mado gave me at the beginning was to memorize the precepts. And after some time, I understood why it makes sense, because then you have them there. You don't have to think about them. I mean, I didn't have to go back to my notebook. They were already there. And this gives some level of maybe some relaxation, because you know they're there, and also of being more conscious. Uh, Also being more mindful and more considerate. Uh, I've noticed that I usually cycle to the university, and there's a bridge that I have to cross, and there's a bike lane. And after the bridge, the bike lane becomes very narrow, and so only like one or two bicycles can go at a time. And I found myself that I was often pedaling faster, and maybe even taking advantage of someone who was from my eyes noticeably slower just to go first. And which would make me, I mean, which now that I tell it, it makes no sense because I mean, what I was winning like 10 seconds. But it is this attitude of maybe it's also a way of stealing, of taking advantage of something that maybe you have, maybe because more training or the bicycle, or maybe just the other person had a bad day, whatever. But is this consideration in the things that you do? So, some ways, this cultivation of ethical sensitivity, it is also a cultivation of mindfulness, of sati, uh, which it is also something that has surprised me, like how much it has impact on my formal sitting uh, practice, like the formal meditation sitting practice. Um, and as the Zen story of the beginning suggests, it is a challenging place. Uh, it is not always an easy place to go. And it is challenging because one is confronted with inner tensions and with outer ones. Uh, I found that I have to confront with truthfulness, be honest about what it is happening and about the exploration, because I think often we tell ourselves a story or to try to justify things that maybe didn't come from a pure place. And one confronts also the ego and maybe desires and aversions. But at the same time, it cultivates compassion and courage. It is not easy to change your ideas, and it is not easy to change your patterns of your life, and especially if there is no courage to do it. But as we practice the precepts, I've observed that we also get closer to the boundary that maybe from the distance looks very rigid, but as we approach it, it becomes more flexible. And the more that we explore them, the more that we engage, the more we can push it forward. Mahatma Gandhi, who didn't have a by no means an easy life, he led an ethical life, and he opposed prejudice and social discrimination through nonviolent resistance, which is not always easy to do. And he used to say, "Be the change that you want to see in the world." And so another last aspect that I want to talk about is the one of mutuality. Um, this is something that I've been able to observe through practicing the precepts, engaging, because it is nothing, it is not something intellectual. So my first approach back then, many years ago, has nothing to do when one really engages consciously. And I've observed that we tend to view our relationship with the world in terms of ownership. What is ownership in the sense of me and myself and mine? So the extension of myself, what I consider as my things, or maybe relationships, friends, family. And many of our actions are predicated in relation to the thought, what is in for me? What do I get out of this situation? Is it going to benefit me? Is it worth doing because I get something out of it, or maybe not? And but the precepts have to go exactly in the opposite direction. They have to do with something other than yourself. They try to get out of your own self-referential world and see the experience of others. Uh, like seeing, like, if someone, I don't know, drops at the university recently, someone forgot a sweater. And it is this feeling of not being like, oh, well, I just take it out of the way, but maybe thinking, well, what would happen if that person would be me? And maybe trying to find a way to that so that the sweater goes back to the person, or maybe seeing the experience of others in a person walking on the street and dropping his or her bags, shopping bags, and instead of just ignoring the person, maybe trying to help it, to help this person, because this is like the natural thing that one maybe would uh, like to experience. Or maybe being in the position of the pig who is playing in the mud. So in some way, this is also connects with some level of harmony. I find inspiring when the Dalai Lama says, whenever I meet someone or something, I always approach it from the standpoint of the most basic things we have in common. All of us want happiness and do not want to suffer. So finally, I just want to say a word about why I call this Dharma talk the gift of the precepts. Um, so there are some reasons. One is that I found that there's a word in, I think it's maybe Pali or Sanskrit, Mahadana, which refers to honoring the act of honoring the precepts is considered as a great gift. And because it creates an atmosphere of security, of respect, of trust. And well, this makes sense. I mean, think of when we are of a situation where we are with friends or family, like big gathering. I mean, there's this sense of security. No one is really, uh, well, depending, maybe it depends on the friends you have, but in general, no one is really worried about your belongings, whether someone is going to steal them, or maybe not really worried if a conversation is going to hurt someone. But it also can also happen in situations when we don't know the people. For instance, in the retreats I have been, uh, usually the doors of the rooms are not locked, but everyone is consciously practicing the precepts, and this creates a feeling of trust that you know that your suitcase or your backpack uh, is not going to disappear after the first meditation sitting. Uh, but it is also a gift to yourself. I found that it is also a gift of freedom, and maybe it is not maybe freedom is not the first thing that comes to our minds, or at least didn't come to my mind when one thinks about ethical precepts, because they seem to be like constraints. But maybe that also has to do with the way we see freedom. Uh, because I'm not only talking about freedom to do something, which is uh, which is good, I support it. But what about freedom from something? What about freedom from envy? What about freedom from hate? What about freedom from aversion or from delusion? And I mean, also there's a positive part of the precept. So all the precepts have this positive statement, and in also looking at the positive side, it opens the heart. It looks for something also noble, like maybe generosity, or maybe lending a hand to someone, or maybe trying to stay equanimous instead of being reactive. And this is also another gift, but also maybe in a more literal way. So, what happens when we look for a gift for someone? It is a moment when we stop thinking about ourselves and have to think about others. And finally, I will just conclude with a poem from an 8th century Zen poet, Pang Yung. Well, probably not pronounced correctly, but something like that. When the mind is at peace, the world too is at peace. Nothing real, nothing absent. Not holding on to reality, not getting stuck in the void. You are neither holy nor wise, just an ordinary fellow who has completed the work. Thank you.